Hey, the Energy Nerd Show is like that movie Groundhog Day. It just keeps coming back and coming back, but we're not Bill Murray. Hey, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Who's our guest in this episode of the Energy Nerd Show?
Today we have Jason Frost. He is an associate at Synapse working on EVs.
Hey, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bruce. Excited to be here.
So you sent us a really interesting and nice and simple graph. Can you tell us a little bit about what it shows?
I sent a graph that shows the impact of California's new Advanced Clean Truck Rule, which is California's major initiative to increase the number of hydrogen and electric trucks on the roads throughout the state. And the rule puts requirements on auto manufacturers to produce numbers of hydrogen and electric zero-emission trucks between the years 2024 and 2035. So what I did is I took that information and that trajectory and extended it out to 2050, just extrapolating, imagining that progress continues at a similar rate to see if the rule would set California on track to meet its long-term emissions goals in 2050. And what I found is that by 2050, the rule could put California on track to have almost 80% of medium and heavy-duty trucks on its roads be zero emissions, which is relatively close to where they probably need to be in order to meet their emissions targets.
One of the things you see in this graph is the lag between sales and stock, right? So market share sales has to precede what's the average of what's on the road by, like 20 years in this case?
Yeah, and that's a really important fact to keep in mind when setting clean transportation policy, because vehicles last on the road for, Bruce, you were saying between 15 and 20 years. It's really important to get sales of zero emissions vehicles increasing early on, even if you have a long-term target out to 2040 or 2050. And that's particularly important because right now, sales of zero emission vehicles are pretty low. They're kind of down around 1 or 2% for light duty vehicles, and they're even lower for heavy duty vehicles. So it's really important to put a rule in place to kind of guide automakers to increase sales so that by the time we get to 2030 and really need to be starting to produce almost entirely zero emissions vehicles, automakers are in a position to do so.
So you've been working on EV issues for a while now. Can you talk about any differences that you notice between EVs for regular people and the heavy duty stock?
Heavy duty vehicles offer both some additional challenges and opportunities. There are a lot fewer of them, but they make up a much more diverse group in that you have anything from delivery vans that are kind of running around doing last mile delivery to buses, transit buses, long distance buses, to larger heavy duty truck tractors that are carrying freight across the country. This creates a challenge because all these vehicles have different requirements for how large of a battery they need, how much range they need, how quickly they need to be able to charge. And that's why there are lots of different automakers coming out with lots of different vehicles, both battery electric and fuel cell electric, to handle kind of these varied needs of the sector. But there are also a lot more opportunities with the heavy duty segment because heavy duty vehicles are responsible for a really large fraction of criteria pollutants in addition to greenhouse gas pollutants. These are the pollutants that directly affect people's health and well-being, particularly in environmental justice communities and urban centers where there can be lots of heavy duty vehicle traffic. So it's really important to get a head start on these vehicles in particular, because while we're tackling our carbon goals and tackling the climate challenge, we'll also be really improving the health and safety of local communities.
You're talking about vehicles going around the country, interstate transport, and but this is a California rule. How do you think about the California rule in the context of a larger country and interconnected highway system?
That's a really great question. Right now, we're kind of in a position where there's a lack of federal leadership. So there's like this patchwork of requirements where states can either choose to follow California's rules or they can choose to follow federal rules that don't require any electric vehicles on the road. So going forward, California's rule is a great start to make sure that manufacturers are developing these products and getting ready to sell them in relatively large scale because California is a big state. And fortunately, 15 states have signaled interest in potentially following California's lead and signing on to the rule, which they have the authority to do under the Clean Air Act. There's a lot of potential to grow this market through this kind of patchwork, state-focused framework. But eventually, it'll be really important for the federal government to step in too. And hopefully one day, under a different administration, the federal government can take the lead and develop a path forward on zero emissions vehicles for heavy duty as well as light duty vehicles for the entire country.
Do you have the 15 other states in your head? Are they like dispersed across the nation? Or?
And is Texas one of them?
Texas is not one of them. They're mostly West Coast and Northeastern states, with a few in the Midwest and the Southwest now as well. I don't think I could list all 15 for you, but sprinkled throughout the country, all the way from Massachusetts out to Hawaii, so spanning the full east-west spectrum.
Are there electric heavy-duty trucks available now?
There are. They're in their relatively early stages. Transit buses have been an early leader for electric vehicles, and there are lots of electric transit buses on the road throughout the country and throughout the world. We're just kind of seeing more movement on other relatively less challenging segments to electrify, including delivery vans that are a little smaller and don't have to travel as far over the course of a day. Rivian has one of the new electric vehicle startups, along with Tesla, has already contracted with Amazon to produce, I believe, 100,000 electric delivery vehicles. And we're also seeing some early action taken around ports with vehicles that also stay within a confined area and don't have to drive as far over the course of a day.
There is some really good data about the public health effects of these trucking routes and places where people live near heavy kinds of traffic. I'm wondering, are the activist EJ groups aware of and becoming engaged on this particular issue? Because I feel like the folks pushing the electric vehicles for just regular day-to-day people are often missing a big chunk of consumers who don't necessarily go out and buy a new car every few years. Whereas this issue, I think you are right, it pairs well with environmental justice.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think this area is starting to get a lot more attention from the environmental justice community, because it's going to be really important to make sure that our climate policy is also aligned with making sure that we're reducing pollution in the communities that have historically received the greatest amounts. And I know that there's also been more interest recently in promoting zero emissions transit, which is kind of similar to other heavy duty vehicle segments, a type of vehicle that operates most frequently in urban centers and places where there are lots of people and where local pollutants have an outsized impact on people's health.
Thanks, Jason. It's really interesting.
Thanks, Bruce and Jeannie.
Thanks so much. Good to see you. Thanks for watching. This is Energy Nerd Show and Tell.
It's the show that we want to watch, so we're thinking maybe some of you energy nerds want to watch it too. If you do, then tell your friends and subscribe right around here. Click there.
And check
or there, or over here.
Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and where else?
And the Energy Nerd website at energynerdshow.com. You can always go there. And if you want to be a guest, you can volunteer to be a guest. We love to have guests. In fact, that's kind of what the show is all about.
Absolutely.